So now we're going to be discussing a little bit more about our families and how this Kolbe Index can help us even with our kids. I know we were talking about that a little bit earlier, and I wanted to explore that with you guys a little bit more, especially because you have a really interesting story about your son.
Yeah. So I don't know if we were talking about it earlier on camera, but with Brock, he's our youngest. He's youngest at 28 now, but the story with Brock was as a 15-year-old when we did I used my family as my guinea pig with the assessment. Warren, his words to Brock was, don't get a desk job. I envision you hanging out the side of a helicopter in a mountain saving somebody. And the crazy part about that was Brock was my succession plan for the family business. But fast forwarding, Warren was 100% correct with what he said to Brock. And Brock actually tried The Office for a while, and he hated it. I asked Brock one day when he got back from a holiday, I said, so how was first day back in the office, Brock? He goes, best day I've had in a long time, Dad, and I still hate it. And I went, okay. So Warren, that wisdom we got about Kolbe with Brock in particular, so we moved Brock on from...
And we didn't believe it. And we didn't want to believe it. We were like, no, right? No. We didn't.
And so Brock, fast forwarding 10 years, Tamara, Brock is an air-medic. So not hanging out the side of the helicopter yet.
Pretty darn close.
And he loves it. It's not he's in a career position, but I openly have said to anybody that Brock is in a calling. It's not he'd do it for free. He loves it. And once you find something that you're passionate about like that, Brock was not the ideal biology student when he was being homeschooled by his mother, who loves biology. And you start tying all that together, you get that missing link in the human relationship, that conative part, and you bring that together with the other two parts, and you give him purpose and direction. And cognitively, the kid just took off. And I sit and I listen to him. He as a medical professional,
And what most people would consider, because not everybody, even if they are, say, called to it, there's lots of trauma. There's lots of you're seeing people on the worst days of their life, right? Yeah. And to be able to do that job and excel and grow and continue, air medic is not, the primary care paramedic or even advanced, that's well beyond that. Yeah. And I think you're practically a doctor, I think, on the air, on the flight, right?
Yeah. And he is upgrading to all of that. I think with the organization he's working with, he's one of the youngest hires. And he was an ACP when they hired him, and now he's currently getting his critical care paramedic, so he'll be at the top of that. And but honestly, I think for parents, when you're looking at Kolbe, just because this is how I need to do things, and this is how his dad needs to do things, we assume that when I'm teaching my children, this is how you do things. That's not necessarily true. And that can cause a lot of tension within the family. And so when Warren worked with us and we saw Brock's MO and my MO, I'm an 8922, Brock is a 3368, high potential for conflict in every area of life that we do things. So,
and we assume sometimes, I think, as parents, that our kids are going to be like one or the other.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Or that they're going to be like their mom, they're more like their dad, but they can have completely different personality and traits and
right. And personality is one thing, and cognitive ability is a completely other thing. But this doing, and you grow up thinking this is just how you do that.
Yeah.
As a teacher. Yeah. This is how you teach math. No. What does he need to learn it? What ways? And, not as much information. Well, guess what? We're doing linear algebra today. You better have all the information. And it just wasn't like that. And so it taught me so much. And to be able to help parents to go, give your child the freedom to be themselves. Yes, you still need rules. Yep. You still need, working together. You still need to keep your kids safe, right? But allowing them this freedom.
We watch our daughter in particular with her two boys and how she parents them with the Kolbe wisdom. So the oldest boy has his Kolbe Index. We were able to do an assessment on him using Kathy and the master consultants that can actually do an assessment on a child.
So it's a nonverbal assessment. This child might have physical or mental disabilities, or just be too young to take the assessment.
But we watch Nicole communicate with our oldest grandson, and it's, there's consequences for your action. That still doesn't change, but how she communicates with them, because she understands her own MO, because we used her as our guinea pig. She's now using the wisdom of those two strengths to communicate with her child and reason with them and let them make choices. And there's consequences to how you do things. And as parents, we do the best we can with the tools we got. She has that one extra tool, and that extra tool is amazing. So I think within a family dynamic, communication, holidays, budgeting, chores,
communication, it's all different,
Just knowing all that about each individual in the house, and knowing how your 6-year-old son or daughter needs to do something. They need to do it that way. And instead of them still drive you crazy as a parent, but at least you understand the why. And I to me, that's invaluable. We didn't have that, grew up in that generation where it was you feared disappointing mom and dad a bit, and you just didn't want to cross them. And I look at the positive reinforcement. The kid still has time out. There's still consequences when they misbehave. That doesn't change any, but I think it takes the conflict side of the family dynamic from up here way down here, because there's just a better way of reasoning with that little human being in your family, and you understand why they need to do it that way.
And it's like you learn a whole new level of communication.
Yes,
it is. And our oldest, Nicole, and our firstborn boy is Carson. He's also a paramedic. So you would think 2 boys, 2 paramedics. Brock's and Carson's MOs are not the same at all either. And Carson's gifting as a paramedic with a little bit more, much more information and much more of a system. His gifting as a paramedic is completely different than Brock. And Carson works a lot he can connect with people. It's not that Brock doesn't connect with people, but Carson gets into asking questions. Tell me about your family. Let's do this. He's got a system.
Disarming.
Yes.
Yeah. So as paramedic partners, when they roll up on scene together, and they've worked together, and I've listened to them talk this, they're rolling up, could be dark at night, lights are on, and
tragedy.
And Carson's assessing what they need. He's the information guy. Brock, he's going in, just doing. We're gonna deal. And so as paramedic partners, they work really well together because their MOs are different, and
they complement each other so much.
And from a genetic standpoint, we've actually had done assessment on twins, and their MOs are completely different.
Their MOs can be completely different.
People might say that,
wow,
is there any genetic correlation to your MO? No, there's not.
So then I guess my next question would be, when it comes to your children, because this is like super fascinating, how is knowing your child, how does that keep them safe?
Doesn't that come down to what is safety to you?
Right.
What is safety to you? And parents are going to put different safeguards in place based on our MOs, right? Yeah. I want lots of information. I want lots of systems. I want no risk. You're wearing a bike helmet at all the time, Yeah. But safety for our kids is knowing, I feel, knowing what our children need to be free to be themselves, and to be able to communicate that they do have that choice. They do have that power to be themselves, but advocate for yourself. That's the one thing that Kolbe allows students, young people to do, is to advocate. This is what I need, right? Mom, I know, Mom, you need this from me. Mom may be over the top or whatever, certain, I think they call them helicopter parents and things like that. But it's like, Mom, this is what I need. And we've loved Kolbe for that. When I work with students that are struggling in school, or parents that have students that are struggling, and the parents have these high expectations, and we go through that, and it's like, what does this child need? And keeping them safe, whether it's social media and phones and accessible to that. Never before, I think, have we had a situation where so many outside people have access to our children.
And influences, yeah.
The influence is there.
And do you think like with like when we're talking about the Kolbe Index as well, because you get to know your kids and their skill sets, maybe you can set unknown safety parameters for like the what ifs. If you know that your child is more likely to, I don't know, lie and go to a party, and then it's like, okay, so what safeties do you have in place? If you know what your child's capable of,
right,
and you know what their skills, skill set is, if they're good at certain areas, or they're more sneaky, or right, because it's all about also they're wanting to gain their own independence, right?
Yeah. Well, and that gets into parenting 101, which is a whole nother podcast likely, or two. But like the safety for the kids, I'll take our own 3 children. Their MOs are all completely different. So for Deb to go into detail with Brock, who's a complete opposite in strength numbers than she is, it's likely better for me to have the conversation, because I'm going to summarize it and not go into detail, or at least be present in the room and read the room. Because as she's going into the detail, I need to go, okay, she's starting to lose him. And that happens naturally with those, knowing those MOs. So,
and it's difficult with an 8 in a fact find and Brock being a 3. I'm thinking more information is better for you. It's not for him.
Yeah.
And so Blair will simplify that. Brock, what your mom is saying is this and this. 2 things.
Yeah.
Follow that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being on the show here, and for all of you at home. If you would like to learn more, you can always come back and check out our next show.